8 years ago, I was gonna quit filmmaking. I'd been making videos for 5 years at this point, and I had been getting better, but there was still something missing. And I hadn't yet made a video that I was truly proud of. I'd made a lot of videos. I'd experimented. I had tried out a bunch of different things. If you go over to my YouTube channel and you sort by oldest videos, there's a lot of videos over there. A lot of them are kind of interesting and a little rough. These were the kinds of videos that I had spent a lot of my time making when I was getting into this, was videos like this, videos of me just simply practicing the process of making a video. This was a self-filmed video I did of me riding around a construction site on my BMX, edited quite aggressively to some music. Wow. There's the peak of my athletic abilities right there. I had been making videos for 5 years, and I had been experimenting with it, getting better at it, but I hadn't made anything that felt that connected with people, that had story in it. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. I tried over and over again. I thought, okay, we need to make a documentary about this thing, and it's going to take 6 months and a lot of people. And I kept trying to, I actually made several Kickstarters and spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, how do we get funding? Because I want to get money to then make this thing and buy the sliders, buy the lenses that we need, because we need equipment. And multiple times in a row, I got really excited about taking on this massive documentary, and then I wouldn't follow through, or I would start filming it, and then I would notice, this is not going the way that I want it to. The project isn't coming together. And after a certain point, that can really start to grind your gears. It can really, really get to you. And I had decided I wanted to do this filmmaking thing. I mean, in my Instagram bio, I had storyteller and cinematographer, which I felt like an incredible imposter having that in my Instagram bio when I really felt like I hadn't told any meaningful stories yet. I didn't even really know what the role of a cinematographer even was, but I just thought that sounded cooler than videographer. And maybe you can relate to that. I'm hoping that you can, that you've been at a place before where you felt you could make better things, where you knew you had more potential. And especially in the era of video making that I grew up, it was a beautiful time. Like this right here was my first camera, the Canon T2i. And I made so many videos with this thing. And this unlocked a way of filmmaking for at an affordable price. So I was able to buy this while working a part-time job at the very bike shop that I now have my new studio in, which is just fantastic. And this camera was awesome, but I bought it in 2011. And by the time it was 2013, 2014, my equipment was starting to really show its age. The quality wasn't really matching up. And so I had failed at multiple projects so far, and I knew I really wanted to do a documentary, and I was telling people I was a storyteller, but I still hadn't done it. And then I started to tell myself these excuses like, it's the gear. It's the fact that I don't have gear. A new camera is going to be so expensive though. How am I going to save up and buy this camera? And I got to this point in 2015 where my full-time job was coming to an end, and I had a summer before me. And usually the best advice at the time was like, if you're gonna try and make the transition into doing the filmmaking thing full time, you should save up some money ahead of time. You should have some clients lined up. But most of the client work that I'd done to that point was not really related to what I wanted to make more of. So I didn't really want to work more with the clients I had in the past, because I had been freelancing with video alongside my full-time jobs, my part-time jobs alongside school. I'd been freelancing and tinkering, but I hadn't really developed a client base. And then my full-time job was coming to an end. And so it was ending in the spring, and I had this summer before me, and I knew I had this big problem. I had a problem that I hadn't yet made a story I was proud of. And then my next problem was I didn't have the gear. And then my next problem was I didn't have the experience. And then my next problem was I had no audience. I think at this point I had 500 subscribers after 5 years. And that was even after having some videos that did quite well. Like I made some of these biking videos at events. And what I would do is I would try to have the first video up from an event the next day. That was my way to be different. So it wasn't going to be the best filmed video, but I was going to be the first to the internet. And I did this multiple times actually, where I would get home from the event, edit all the way through the night, get that video live by 6 a.m. the next morning. So that way people could watch it, and then it would drive traffic to my YouTube channel. That was one of my first videos that did 30,000 views, which was amazing. And then my next video did 200. It was embarrassing. It was like, okay, these people aren't actually interested in following my work. They just wanted to follow this event. But 5 years in, I only had 500 subscribers, and I had all these problems I was up against. And, I was frustrated. And at that time, I wasn't making any videos. I was actually spending a ton of time on my phone, and I was not doing anything creative. And I knew I needed to start being creative. So I did this small challenge with myself. I said, okay, instead of just putting this pressure that I need to make some big cinematic film, let's do daily time lapses. So for a month straight, every single day, I would go and I'd find a time lapse with my phone and record it. And coincidentally, when you're recording a time lapse with your phone, then I'm not on my phone, not like numbing myself out with just scrolling social media. And then I would have some time to think. And it was really interesting as I started to look for these different time lapses throughout the day, how it started to change the way that I saw the world. I was now looking for time lapses. I was looking for shots to capture so I could get a great daily time lapses. And I learned, there's actually a lot of moments in my day-to-day life to find these time lapses. And this is actually really enjoyable. So I started that, and that was successful. That was the first time that I'd followed through with myself and daily created something. Then I figured, we need to start figuring out how to be on camera if I want to build an audience. But the idea of like recording a video again and putting that out there with me on it was just so overwhelming. So instead of doing it publicly on my YouTube channel, I was super embarrassed about putting a video up with my face talking, because the last one I did was like 3-4 years prior. I decided, I'm going to record 4 videos of me just getting comfortable speaking to the camera. So I started doing that. And then those went okay. They weren't amazing, but it helped break the ice of me building this momentum where I knew if I wanted to be a creator on the internet, I needed to build an audience. If I needed to build an audience, I needed to create videos. And if I needed to create videos, I needed to talk in them. So I did these 4 private videos, just shared them with my friends. And I just got more comfortable with, hey, we're setting up a camera. We're going to put a microphone on and we're going to talk. And I did those while I was still working my full-time job. And it was time for that job to end. And so I came up with a strategy because I didn't have the camera gear and I didn't have the experience. And I wanted to see what was it actually like to work in a film production company. So in downtown Vancouver, there was these guys that were running a production company and they had a Red camera. That was like the dream, right? For every filmmaker at that time, if you were in the DSLR era, you looked at all the people shooting on Red and you thought, if only I could be one of those people. If only I could just touch the Red camera, it would be like a blessing onto my filmmaking career and it would change things forever. That's what a lot of us young teenagers thought at the time. I would love to work with these guys. I would love to use a Red camera. I would love to use high quality filmmaking equipment. I think that would make a big difference, and it'd be cool to be able to experiment and learn how to use it and also learn about how they edit films. So what I ended up doing was reaching out to Ryan, and instead of just sending an email, because it's like the idea of like sending someone an email and then waiting for them to get back to you, I was trying to think like, how do I stand out? Because I know a lot of people must be reaching out to Ryan, trying to like connect and pick your brain. Like those are emails that I would imagine someone like Ryan would get a bunch. And so instead of asking an email, trying to take from Ryan and being like, hey, can I come pick your brain? What I decided was, I noticed that Ryan had posted a hard drive that he had for sale. So I quickly messaged and I was like, I'll buy your hard drive. And it was $500 for an 8 terabyte RAID drive. And I said, I'll buy it, but I want to come to Vancouver and pick it up and have coffee with you. And so Ryan agreed to that. And I drove to Vancouver, picked up the hard drive, and I got to have coffee with him. And when I sat down with Ryan, I tried to pitch him this idea of me working with them for a summer. And I didn't want to be an intern. I think the term that I came up with was apprentice. I wanted to be an apprentice. I didn't want to be an intern. I didn't want to work for free. I wanted them to pay me, and I wanted to actually learn the skills and be able to use some of the equipment that they had. And so Ryan agreed. Ryan and Josh at Transposition Films, they said, okay, we'll take you on. And so I had a job lined up to work with them. And so I was going to work alongside them for a summer. And so I had this summer where I was going to be in downtown Vancouver, and suddenly I had access to experience because there's these people that actually worked in the film industry. I had access to equipment. So the deal I made with them was that in the off hours when the production equipment isn't actually being used for the studio, I could then use that equipment to film my own projects. And especially something that was very important was they had an edit bay. They had 2. And so I could edit my work at the studio, because at that time I had just a garbage laptop. And so even if I got my hands on a better camera, there's no way I could even edit that footage. And that was a really big problem. So I needed a computer to edit on, which would have been thousands of dollars. And I wanted to use professional equipment. So these guys took me on, and we went into that summer, and that's when I made this deal with myself. So when we had been building up to the summer, I was deciding, you know what, if this summer doesn't go well, I need to quit this idea. I need to stop telling myself that I have what it takes to be a storyteller. I need to quit. So going into the summer, working with Transposition, I was thinking, okay, we really got to show up, learn a bunch, see if I want to do this. And the most important thing to me was I wanted to leave this summer with a project I was proud of. And the reason for that was I had, at this point, talked to dozens of people that worked making videos. It was my favorite thing to do. I love asking people questions. And so I just pester people. Whenever I could meet someone that worked in the image capturing world, if it was a photographer I noticed on a flight, if it was someone who's operating a camera at a football game, I loved talking to people about what they did and how they made that work as a career. And everyone I seemed to talk to would have this refrain they would say over and over again, which was, you can't make projects you like when you've got client work, or yeah, like I'll make projects that I like one day, but right now I'm just bogged down with client work and I won't be able to. And I kept hearing this just over and over again, that people weren't able to work on the projects they really liked because they had so much work they had to do for clients. And I heard that and I went, I don't want that to be my next 10 years. I don't want to get 10 years down this filmmaking road, trying to grow a company, trying to buy gear, trying to buy a red camera, rent a studio, hire on people, work with bigger and bigger clients, only to have reached a day where I still couldn't say I'd made stuff I liked for me. And my solution to that was, we are going to start my filmmaking career with something I'm proud of, or this isn't worth doing. And I meant it, right? Because I'd been experimenting with video. I'd been freelancing with video. I'd gotten paid to make videos. I'd done wedding films. I'd done some corporate microdoc style projects. I'd made dozens of biking videos. Like, I'd gotten good enough at starting to make videos for people to seek me out and pay me. But I was getting into this because I wanted to make stuff that made people feel things, right? Like, as a teenager, when I was in film festivals, and you'd be sitting there and some of them would connect with you, some of them wouldn't. But then suddenly you'd get to this piece that as the visuals were on the screen, I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. You could like feel the theater filled with people just be locked in. And that experience and that feeling is what I wanted to create in my projects. That's what I wanted to do. And yet nothing I had made even got anywhere close to that. And so I said to myself, we're going to start, if I'm going to do this as my main thing, making films, being a filmmaker, if I was going to live up to the name in my Instagram bio of storyteller and cinematographer, I want to start this journey with something I could say, I'm proud of that. I'm not going to give myself a free pass and say, we'll wait till someone will fund me. We'll wait till someone will pay me. So to be clear, I was working full-time for a studio. I had a full-time job working with Ryan and Josh, and I worked my butt off. I wanted to make myself valuable and I wanted to learn from them. But alongside that, I said, okay, well, with the work that I'm doing for them, I think I was making about $1,500 a month. That was the goal benchmark that we had to hit. I was sleeping on couches. I didn't have the van yet, and it was pretty rough. There's a family that took me in and let me sleep in their living room, which was really great. I'm just still so grateful for that to this day. And what happened at the start of the summer when I made this commitment that by the end of this summer, we have to finish with something that I'm proud of, I experienced the same momentum that started to happen when I was doing these daily time lapses. When I was doing those time lapses and I was in the rhythm of it, I started to see the world differently. I started to look for opportunities differently. Things felt possible. Just doing another time lapse felt easy. And so when I made this commitment that we are going to make a film I'm proud of this summer, what happened inside of me was I started to look for what could I make the film about? Because if I told myself, okay, you've got one summer, suddenly the urgency's on, I can't put it off to next year. The problem with most of my earlier failed story projects is that they were way too big, way too large in scope. I wanted to film and follow someone for 6 months. I wanted to do some project that's spread across all of North America. Like, I kept having all these massive ideas. And of course, they were almost impossible to follow through with because I didn't have the skill set to back it up. Like, where do you even start? I was writing all these Kickstarter pitches, trying to get people to support a filmmaker who had never made a film so that way I could buy a slider. Like, what are we doing here? So I started seeing the world differently and I started looking for a story to tell. And I thought back to who did I look up to growing up? And what I looked up to was a lot of these filmmakers that made these like micro documentaries on Vimeo. And some of my favorites would get something called a staff pick. At the time in my life, that was like the golden badge of indie filmmaking. I wanted to have a staff pick on one of my videos. That was a dream that I had. I thought all these other filmmakers that I look up to, they got staff picks. If I get a staff pick, that will change my filmmaking career. All these awesome projects are going to come in. It's going to be life-changing. So what could I make it about? Well, a lot of the filmmakers that I look up to in the adventure space, because I loved the outdoors, I love snowboarding, skateboarding films, mountain biking films. A lot of them were in areas that were already pretty busy. There was a lot of like heavy hitters in that industry. And the thought of making more films that people had already been seeing, to me, just felt like, okay, I'm just going to be another person and I'm not going to do it better than they did. So what am I doing here? And I started to realize, I need to find a category that isn't occupied yet. I need to find a topic. I need to find some way to stand out with this first project, because that would be really awesome. And one day while I was thinking about this, I'd been riding my bike around and I was hunting for projects. I had my T2i with me and I was starting to do weekly videos in the same vein as Casey Neistat. I was starting to vlog my life because I wanted to practice the skill set of making a story even on a small scale. And I was making them with my T2i, and I was down at English Bay in Vancouver, and there's a slackline set up in the park. And I went and I came and talked to the person that was walking on the slackline. I said, hey, can I like join you on this slackline? And I did, and it was a ton of fun. And I said, how do you guys know where to slackline? Like, it seems like you all know each other, because there was about 6 or 7 people there. Like, how do you know where to go slacklining? And he was saying, there's a Facebook group that you can actually join, and we post each time that we go and do a different slackline all over the city. It's called like Slackline Vancouver was the name of the Facebook group. And so if you actually go back to some of my old videos, you can see the very moment in some of these first early vlogs I did where I would go down to Vancouver, like this opening shot of essentially my very first vlog was from downtown Vancouver in English Bay, from one of the days where this happened. So this shot right here. So this right here is from that very place on the very day where I tried a slackline for the first time with this group of friends that I was meeting. I had slacklined before, but this was the first time that I was hanging out with this crew, and I joined the Facebook group. And later that weekend, someone made a post that they were setting up a highline at Lighthouse Park. And this blew my mind because I'd watched a lot of the highlining videos that were posted on the internet. I found this really fascinating. I personally like slacklining, and I had only ever seen slacklining highlining videos from Europe, Flight of the Frenchies, and from Utah. Those were the only 2 places I had seen highlining videos. So to see in this Facebook group that someone was posting that they were going to be highlining in Vancouver that weekend, that blew my mind. So I thought, okay, this is it. This is my moment. So the guy who made the post, I messaged him. I'm like, hey, I've got access to a red camera. Can I come and film you with this red camera? Like, I'm going to get amazing shots. It's going to be awesome. I use the red camera as like my way in the door. And I don't think he knew what a red camera was. I think he thought I was talking about a drone. We actually found out later that he thought I was talking about a drone. But anyhow, he's like, yeah, man, just show up. And that's a theme that I've learned from the slackliners over and over again, is that if the invitation is out there, show up. If you're in the community, actually get there. I did this so many times prior where I would email someone that I saw doing something cool and I'd be like, hey, can I come film you? And then I'd be annoyed when I didn't hear back. And the reality is, if I'm finding out about someone doing something cool, I'm probably finding out about it through video. And if there's already videos about this person out there, they probably have like dozens or hundreds of people reaching out trying to film them do cool stuff, especially in the world of action sports and that kind of thing. They probably have enough people. They don't need some young teenage punk who doesn't really know what he's doing show up. You need to find areas where there's a need, where there's not much content. And in Vancouver at that time, there was essentially a couple highlining videos that you had to search for actively. They were not out there being made. And so I will never forget packing up the red camera to take with me for the first time to go shoot on this Lighthouse day. I put it all in the backpack. I'm from a farm town. And so when in the city, I mean, there's buses and stuff, right? And I remember going out to catch the bus. And this was my first time doing that. I was like actually legitimately nervous that I'd get to the right spot. And I kept thinking, like, people are going to know that in my backpack here is like $40,000 of camera gear. Like, what happens if I get robbed? A lot was going through my mind. And I got about halfway through the bus ride when I just mentally realized I don't have the monitor cable. I don't have the very cable I need to actually use the touchscreen of the Red. It was a Red Epic. And so you need the touchscreen to change the settings. And I didn't have the cable. So I got off the bus, got back on a different bus, went all the way back to the studio, went out there again. So I showed up at Lighthouse Park and I head down there with the Red camera, all excited. And I start filming the guys set up and rig these different highlines. And that was the day that I met Spencer. And there's something that happens when you meet someone who's just an absolute like substance-based character. They're just oozing with character. And Spencer was one of those people. But that from the moment I met him, this guy's just built for the camera. Like, he's grungy. He had a cigarette in his mouth as he's pulling on these lines, and he was like in your face. And the first thing he said to me is, I said, "Hey man, like, can I film you rig?" He's like, "Sure, man, but I never see any of this stuff anyway, so just do what you want." And I remember thinking, just, okay, right on, like, challenge accepted. I can deal with this. If you're not going to be flexible with me, I'll film some stuff and I'll show you that I mean business here. So I took that as a challenge and I filmed a bunch of shots that day. And what ended up happening was, I was going to do an interview that day with one of the people that was present that I thought could give a perspective. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a documentary about these highliners because this is so cool. Like, this subject matter is amazing. I found it. Let's make this documentary. So I'm going to start doing interviews. And I went to set up the Red camera to do this interview. And I didn't realize the record mode I was in was actually like the highest data rate possible. So this one SD card I had with me completely filled up, this Red mag. Only had 2 of them. I swapped in the other one, hit format. Turns out that I had accidentally formatted all of the footage that I'd captured up until that point that day. So all the first shots that I captured, I deleted. But what I did do is I sat down and I had an interview and I talked with someone about slacklining, about the community, and about Spencer, about this guy who was leading the community and doing some of these outrageous things. Spencer was doing some just monstrous projects, and he had just a knack for getting people hooked in and getting them to participate and help them pull it off, regardless of what maybe the parks rangers would want to happen. He managed to find a way to just make stuff happen. And I walked away from that feeling pretty dumb that I managed to delete all of my footage from that day, but I had an interview. And from that point forward, I was like, we're going to make a film about community, about slacklining. And I told Spencer, if there's any project that you're doing coming up, let me know. And I went out and filmed with him more. And I started to cut some of this footage together and share it with Spencer to show that I was serious, to show that I really wanted to do justice to their sport. And I was actually going to edit this stuff and show it with them. So this right here is a sequence that you're seeing if you're watching the video feed where I came and shot Spencer, filmed a bunch of these different angles of him jumping around and rigging a line. And then I edited it together and I shared it with Spencer. And he was kind of like, oh, this is neat, right? Like, I haven't seen filmmakers share stuff with me this quick. And so I kind of got some buy-in from Spencer. So to be clear, at this point, I had no funding. There was no money involved. I had no camera equipment that was good aside from a junky T2i, which had a broken lens. And I had no audience. And how I'd gotten around all those problems was working with a studio that had equipment that I could borrow in the meantime, and I negotiated with them to make this arrangement. I started looking for stories aggressively. So in 3 weeks of being in the city, I found a subject matter. And it could have been any subject matter. It could have been a jazz trumpet player. It could have been a musician. It could have been a skateboarder. It could have been someone who was doing a cool graffiti project. It could have been any subject matter, but I found one that I was curious about and I could get excited about. And everything I was sensing just felt like, oh, this is dripping with story, right? This is going to be pretty hard to mess up. This is a shot that you're seeing right now, which is the very first interview I did in the project. And it ended up getting so many laughs when the final film was completed, right? Like, it was one of the just absolute beauty interviews that made the whole piece happen. So I share all that about the obstacles that I was up against is because once I decided we were going to do anything possible to get a film done that summer, some of the things that I thought were non-negotiables or impossible started to solve themselves. And I had been with the other filmmakers that I knew in the Fraser Valley area, I had been pretty generous with lending whatever I owned with them, and I had offered to help shoot stuff with people for free. And that kind of reputation of being someone who's willing to be involved, willing to share, like, that bodes well for you. So I was working with this production company in downtown Vancouver. It was going well, and they trusted me with their stuff. And I was on the lead of a story. And Spencer knew that I was willing to come and film them. So Spencer, I got a call from him one day and he said, hey, I've got this friend Friedy. He's coming from Germany. And we're going to basically go to Squamish and try to rig the longest high line in Canada that's ever been rigged. Do you want to come film that? And I thought, perfect. This is going to work really well because if I can film them doing one massive project, that can be the container that my story lives in. And instead of trying to follow the community across 6 months, what if I just followed them for a week and then made this story from that? And of course, Spencer put out that offer of, hey, do you want to come film us do this? And I said yes. And I thought, sweet, I'm going to be able to take the red camera. We're going to head out and I'm going to film this epic movie. And I started to panic. I'm like, okay, oh goodness, I need some help. And so my friend RJ, who was the only other filmmaker that I knew from Chilliwack at the time, I said, RJ, like, dude, would you be willing to come out and help me like film and take photos on this project? Like, it'd be so rad to have you involved. And I mean, there was no funding. No one was getting paid, but the energy, people are drawn to someone who's getting it done. People are drawn to interesting ideas. And so I convinced RJ over some IHOP. It didn't take much convincing that we should film together on 1 week in Squamish. And some of this was filmed on the GH4, a lot of it actually, this packing sequence. And so I was cycling between the GH4 and the red camera. And on the first day, I had to get all that equipment up the mountain. The slackliners themselves, their bags are massively heavy up to 80 pounds sometimes. And so what I did was I had to shuttle my gear up multiple times. So I did 2 full trips up on that first day to get all this cinema gear up to the top of the mountain because RJ wasn't there yet. And I got it all up there and I learned something very quickly, which was when you have the big cinema camera out, people feel like they're in a movie. Things change. Like I was really struggling to get natural interactions and moments from people. Like the second the camera came out, they would like look down the lens and try to interact with it. And it made it very difficult to get shots that would work because everyone kept looking in the camera. And then I noticed this other thing, that the camera took like 30 seconds to boot up and I only had 2 batteries and 2 red mag cards. So I was burning through batteries and media on the first day. And what I started to do is set down the red camera and I would pick up the GH4. And what people felt when I picked up the GH4 was, hey, now this is like just the mess around camera, the behind the scenes camera. This doesn't matter. And that ended up being the best thing that could possibly happen for my film. People felt like the proper camera was the red one. And when I was messing around with the GH4, filming my shots, I was just playing around for YouTube. And so that's where I ended up getting a ton of these moments in the film where I'm just standing next to people with a wide angle lens on and talking to them. I'd get nice and close and just have conversations with them. Having the GH4 be something that was disarming for my subject matter. And I started to actually get some really nice moments on the cliffside here, chatting with people, asking them what they were thinking about. And I was just right there in the thick of it. And I started to develop a sense of like, in these films, I want to give people a feeling like they're there, like I'm experiencing it. And that was maybe the first time as a storyteller, I started to develop a sense for what my style was. Like, what is my voice as a storyteller? And I knew I wanted to give this feeling to the viewer at home that they were also sitting there on the cliff edge. So this shot again right here with Michael, I'm just standing there next to him with a wide angle lens. And then I proceed to have a conversation with him. So all these moments like this is just me hanging out with the GH4. And it ended up being such a better experience than when I'd hold the big cinema camera. So here I had been thinking the whole time, all I need to do is get my hands on a red camera and it's going to make my film effortless. And then it turns out using the red camera as a one-person team was really hard. It would take 30 seconds to boot up. I was burning through my memory and I was stressed because we were going to be up there for 5 days. Like, how do I do this? So I had borrowed a drone. I had borrowed all this gear, but it ended up becoming the GH4 that I had borrowed that was getting the gold, getting the stuff that I really needed to make this project work. Just absolutely epic stuff, just standing there on the cliffside, getting able to see people and the community thrive. And this was awesome for me. It was great to be there on location, to be seeing this stuff happening and to just be sinking my teeth into a product that I could be really excited about. It was very special. And when you're there in person, it opens yourself up to some unique things to happen that you might not have planned for. So my plan when I went into this project was I wanted to make a piece about community and how can you get people together around an idea. And I was going to film it in these 5 days, edit it together into a 10-minute video, and it was going to hopefully have some more feeling in it than my last pieces. And what happened was, by actually being there, I was standing on this pillar where you see this shot coming from right now. But I'm standing here on this pillar. Spencer walks towards me, and it's a vertical pillar that you can't climb off it when someone's on the high line. So I climbed up on top of it. Spencer walks all the way over to me, and then he proceeds to actually, first he ties the rope to his ankle, And then he proceeds to, I'll just show you the shot right here. So we didn't talk about it. I didn't know he was going to. I didn't want him to, actually, which doesn't matter because he's not going to do what I want anyways. But I was standing on that pillar. Spencer walked up to me with a harness on, walked away. And then before I could get off the pillar, he was walking towards me like he is now with a harness off. And so by just being present, this is the shot right here. This is the first time I saw Spencer solo. And this was visceral. I just felt like completely overwhelmed as this was happening. I can't say I really enjoyed it happening. It felt like it was happening to me. And then right here at this exact shot, he looks in my eyes as I'm holding the camera. And he says, "I effing love this." And he's just looking right at me. And I'm like, oh my word. Like, what have I gotten myself into? This is mental. And he proceeds to walk off the line straight towards me. And we have, to me, which is my favorite moment from the film, the emotion that was just exploding out of Spencer here was something that I had never experienced before. I'd never seen someone that close, and it was visceral. And to be able to stand there with a single small camera and capture that and to know I had that moment was wild for me. This is so cool. And at that point, I'm like, sweet, we've got a documentary here. I've filmed for 5 days. They ended up rigging the longest line in Canada. They walked it with leashes on. I actually don't think they sent it, so they didn't walk beginning to end without falling, but it was like, oh, hey, there's something engaging about this. And then we've got this unique layer where Spencer does soloing, which just hurts my brain. But it'll be like wow factor in the actual edit itself. And so I was planning to make about a 10-minute film, and I was so excited. And I hope you hear from me just some of these lessons that I had as far as like realizing the real power. If you're going to be there as a small team, having a single camera in your hand and being able to be present and be relationally engaged with the subject matter made all the difference, right? Instead of being a big fancy production crew, the red camera actually stayed in the bag most of the time, and it was a smaller camera that really enabled me to get these amazing moments. I'm super grateful that my friend RJ was there for that first filming portion. He grabbed some awesome shots and some photos, and it was helpful to like rope some people in to actually participate in this excitement. And after those 5 days were over, I was pumped. I had a film. So I was very excited to get back and start editing it. We started editing it, and about a month later, I was on a sailing trip. And when I came back from the sailing trip, I had 8 missed calls from Spencer. For me, I didn't want to know when he was going to solo. If I was there, I would film it, but I didn't want to make plans around it. And so when I got back from this trip, I had 8 missed calls from Spencer. And the first one was like, "Hey man, in 2 days, I'm going to go and I'm going to rig the itis." And the implication was, we're going to do it. And then he calls me again, and I had multiple voicemails escalating where he's like, "Dude, I want you to be here and film this." And the next thing I'm thinking, like, okay, I might, one of these voicemails might be a really bad voicemail where I find out Spencer hurt himself and I'm getting a voicemail that he's sitting in a stretcher somewhere. But the very last voicemail was him just like through the roof excited that he had actually walked the world record line. So this is something that people aren't aware of very often, but the main filming of this film, Untethered, was 2 main portions. The first one being these 5 days, and then the next one being where all this soloing footage that you're seeing now is from these first 5 days. And then the actual world record itself, and that was filmed by Zachary Moxley. So Spencer got our friend Zach on the phone, who was an incredible drone operator, and he showed up and he filmed all these shots that you're seeing right here, fully credited in the film, but people just don't have the ability in their brain to put 2 and 2 together sometimes about who's all involved with the project. These shots were shot by Zachary with the Inspire one, and he filmed them way better than I ever would have. So we had a better drone, and he was more aggressive with how close he got than I would ever have felt comfortable. And so we filmed all these shots of Spencer actually going forward, and these shots still blow my mind. So he's catching a high line with no harness on. Incredible, just visceral. And these shots, well, you're watching it take place. Spencer went on to, spoiler, lengthen the world record free solo walk from the person that he looked up to, Andy Lewis. And this footage captured by Zachary immediately after Spencer was asking Zach, like, "Dude, can we use this in the film? Like, Levi's been making this film, following me all summer. Can we put this in the film?" And Zach was on board. So I had a ton of audio footage that Zach needed to make his edit. So I got Zach all these audio clips so that way it wasn't just the sound of a drone. And then Zach shared the drone footage with me. And at this point, still no funding, still no money. We're just doing this because we love it. So summer was now over. Thank goodness someone was there to film Spencer do this world record. And so I had a world record and I had these 5 days of filming and I needed to bring them together. So one of the things I ended up doing was I hiked back to the chief multiple times and I filmed all these time lapses. So throughout the film, you see these different various time lapses take place. And again, these shots here of everyone celebrating Spencer break the world record are actually shots from Spencer free soloing a different time. And that's where there's this phrase where it's like, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I don't fully agree with that. So I've modified it a little bit for myself. And my version of it is never let the order of events affect the way that you're going to edit it. So I pulled some of these shots around and I ended up piecing together a story that built more towards this objective of Spencer eventually breaking the world record. And that became the thrust of the film. And it went from a 10-minute film to a 30-minute film. And I knew what I was sitting on was good. I had made tons of mistakes. I deleted whole memory cards of footage. There were shots that were out of focus, interview shots like this one here that were completely overexposed. I'd messed up audio here. I'd done stuff there, but I knew I had humanity in the piece. And I knew that it was interesting. I knew that I'd stood on the edge of a cliff and gotten emotion out of people in a way that you can't plan for. And so it was now my job to assemble that into an edit that I could share with the world. And that's what I did. So through my YouTube channel, I told the channel, you know what, we're going to release this film for free. I've put all my effort into this. And the reason why I'm going to release it for free is that I want people to see it. And I want to build a reputation that I make great films as the start, as the entry back into the world of here's Levi, he's a filmmaker, watch this film, experience it, and hopefully follow along on whatever I make next. That was kind of my objective. And so I was making these videos, hyping up for the launch, and we eventually ended up screening it December 4th in downtown Vancouver in a theater filled with dirtbags. And it was one of the most proud moments of my entire filmmaking career. It was mind-blowing to me in that in just 8 weeks in a summer, I'd completely changed the trajectory that I was on. I'd gone from a place where I had never made a project I was actually proud of to finishing something that was surreal, finishing something that I could actually say, hey, this is a thing that I made and I really like it. And man, what a special moment for any person who cares about storytelling, cares about wanting to be a filmmaker, to actually finish something for the first time that you can really get behind. And that's one of the best feelings ever. And I wish that I could have, like, to tell other people that are in that similar spot that want to do better things, it's hard for me to try to convince them that they have what it takes right now. And even as I say that, I hear the objections that myself would have said. I would have said, well, I don't have access to a Red camera. Well, I don't have access to an edit bay. Well, my job is too busy. And those are all true things. But what we need to do if we're going to do self-funded projects is we need to find a way around those problems. So still to this point, no one was giving me money. I tried to find some people to like sponsor it. No one was going to sponsor it. I couldn't get any money from anyone, but I needed to like level it up. So at the studio I was working with, Ryan was a colorist, and we really needed the film to feel professional, to feel aesthetic, to feel like it was one big piece. Because by the time this was all said and done, I had used no less than 12 different cameras on the production, and all of them felt quite different. And I knew sound was going to be such an important part of this. So I convinced Ryan that color grading this project would be a really good idea. And he agreed to, which is amazing. And then I also, another sound designer, Keith White, who had been sound designing for like Red Bull's last 10 films, just an absolute legend in the adventure film space. He had told me once at a screening, like, hey, if you have a project you're working on sometime, like I'd love to be involved. So I followed up with him and I said, hey, this is a little bigger than just like a small project, but I have a film I'm sitting on. I don't have a lot of money. I'm paying for it all myself. Are you willing to maybe do the sound mix on this? And he said yes. And so he did that initial sound mix for $500, which was just such a gift for Keith to do that. And the end result is a film that feels very much like a film. It feels like the cohesiveness that ends up happening when got a great sound mix and you've got a color grade that brings the whole thing together. And This film went live on December 6th. So we screened it December 4th. It went live December 6th of 2015. And I felt so proud to be starting this next era of my career, having made something that I was proud of. And what happened was it did pretty well. It ended up getting my goal was to get a staff pick, and we ended up getting that staff pick. So we didn't just get the staff pick; we actually ended up getting pick of the month, which was very cool for me. That was not anything that I ever expected. At that time, the industry had changed a little bit. So when you got a staff pick, it no longer was like your industry break-in moment. You didn't suddenly get like hundreds of emails of people begging to work with you. So that part of the story didn't necessarily work out. But we got this film live, and it kind of did its course on Vimeo and YouTube. And in that process, multiple people reached out about taking it to broadcast, taking it and playing it in different avenues and playing it in film festivals. So I never actually personally submitted this to any film festivals on my own, but I ended up getting dozens of emails from people asking if they could play it in film festivals. So I ended up doing a run of film festivals globally, ended up winning some different awards, which was very exciting. It got like, it's just so cool to get like a box in the mail with an award for a film that you made. Like that's pretty special. And I talked to this company about taking it to broadcast, and I really wanted to keep it on the internet, but at that point the views had kind of tapered off. So it had done about 100,000 views on YouTube, and it had done X amount on Vimeo, and there wasn't really many new views coming in. So we ended up going down this pathway of bringing the film to broadcast, which meant we pulled it down from YouTube, and we had to upgrade all the music licensing, which was a big learning moment for me. So I ended up spending $5,000 upgrading all the music licenses, had to pay to get the sound remixed for broadcast. It ended up being a massive bill to bring it to broadcast. And then the sad part about it for me is that the company that brought it to broadcast ended up screwing me over and not paying me. So it was this conflicting moment in my life where I got to say like, wow, my first self-produced film went to broadcast. But I ended up having to spend $5,000 of my own money to do that. And I never got my big paycheck. It never happened, which is such a bummer. Because I kept thinking like any day the money will come through and I can use that for my next project, and the money never came through. So after a tumultuous relationship with this broadcast company, I put the film back up on YouTube. And this is actually great timing because Free Solo, the documentary, was coming out. And so there was a lot of excitement around the topic of free soloing. And so when I re-uploaded it, I changed the title to The Terrifying Art of Free Solo Slacklining. And it ended up doing very well in the search results. It was being recommended next to all the marketing efforts that Free Solo, the film, was doing. And the second time it got uploaded, it crossed 1 million views in like 6 months. So it was cool to see the film have its second life and get to reach so many more people through being re-uploaded. I share all this because I'm a really strong believer that in 8 weeks you can make a lot of change in your storytelling. And if you're the kind of person that has stuff you want to finish, that you know you're capable of better things, I want to encourage you to set a challenge for yourself and pick a time frame and try to stick to it. It's really powerful in your life when you make a commitment to yourself and say, we're going to show up. Because at that point, I had been hiding. I'd been not trying. I'd been so worried that when I actually try to go make this first story, that it was going to be terrible, that I was terrified that what that would mean about me as a storyteller, what that would mean about me as a filmmaker, the fact that when I actually try, I fail, was miserable. But what I didn't take time to acknowledge is that I was failing already. I had failed multiple things. And what I needed to do was choose a smaller project and actually finish it. And what that put forward in my life was then I was suddenly proud to be a YouTuber. Then I was suddenly proud to be making these videos on the internet. And I think around the launch of this film, we ended up crossing 1,000 subscribers. I think that was around here. But that put forward this motion in my life where I started to take very seriously, regularly documenting my progress as a filmmaker. And that was kind of when I came back to YouTube posting regularly in 2015, that was kind of the story of the channel, was like, I'm learning how to do production videos, and here's some of them, and to be able to see these clips, like, this is just so wild to me. So I was outlining here the process of how we were going to distribute this film. This is so nuts. I didn't want to put a barrier between people and my film. And so I was going to break down that barrier by just giving it away for free. And that ended up being an amazing decision, and an even better decision the next time around when I uploaded it again for free. Here's me on the news talking about it after we released it. That was a pretty special moment. This was the theater that we got to play it in. I wanted to finish off this video by saying a massive thank you. If you've been following this channel for a couple days, a couple years, or since the beginning, I really appreciate you. This has been a very important part of my life, to be able to make videos, upload them, and then interact with people like yourself. And that's why I start most of my videos by saying, hey friend. This isn't just about me trying to put something out there to reach the numbers. It's about connecting with one person. And so I'm hoping by sharing this story, if you're someone who might feel similar to I did and want to quit, maybe you shouldn't. And maybe if you don't quit, some pretty awesome things can happen. Originally, I recorded this to be an Adventure Film Academy show episode, because that's a podcast I do about all things adventure filmmaking. So if you want to dive into that, I've got this show where I just talk about the mechanics and the philosophy that I use to approach making adventure videos. I'd love to have you over there. That's it for this one. Remember, life's better when you make stuff. Peace.